Good evening, everyone. It's your girl, Marcy Thomas. I'm back with you for another episode of the BGC Book Club. So please come on in the room, as I always love to say, and get ready for what's going to be a really good, fun, enlightening, mind-boggling conversation that we are about to have here. So if you're joining us from wherever you are in the world, please feel free to share this out, leave comments, all of those things, just so we can make this not just a dialogue, but make this a community conversation. So I am coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia, originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and a whole bunch of other places in between. So if you don't mind letting us know where you're joining us from, that's great, just so we can know who all is in the room. So everybody, I just have to let you know that this guest tonight, her book, I only found out about it a matter of weeks ago. Now, normally, just so you know, people are oftentimes scheduled months in advance, right? But I found out about this book and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I need to have this conversation as soon as possible. And fortunately, she was available to come and talk to us. So our special guest is Kashana Cauley, who's the author of The Payback. Oops, I'm dropping stuff. The Big Payback. Let's just call it The Payback. But we'll be talking to her about her book. Her other book is The Survivalist, which was named a Best Book of 2023 by the BBC, Today, Vogue, and more. She is also a television writer, having worked on The Great North, Pod Save America on HBO, and The Daily Show with our fave Trevor Noah. Her writing has also appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Esquire, Rolling Stone, The New Yorker, and many other notable publications. So without any further delay, let's welcome Kashana to talk about her 1 week old and 1 day book baby as of this recording, The Payback. Welcome, Kashana.
Hi. Well,
Hi.
thanks for having me.
Oh, yes, I'm so excited to have you here. So excited to get into this conversation, which we tried not to have before we came on live. So, because it's just so compelling to me and I really enjoyed this book. So, first of all, I just want to offer you congratulations on The Payback. I've been hearing a lot of good buzz about it, and a lot of people are really reading it and loving it. So, how does it feel to have this particular book baby out in the world?
This time around has been really wild. A lot of people did find The Survivalist, and a lot of people like it, but I have heard from so many more people this time around. It's not even funny, and I feel loved and appreciated. So thanks to everybody who's already reached out and read and enjoyed the book. And if you haven't, I hope this conversation inspires you to pick it up.
Oh, yes, it definitely should. Hopefully, the conversation will. Once you get a little taste of what this book is about, I'm sure that it will. So, the payback. What is it that inspired you to tell this particular story, which is very timely? Once we get into it, y'all will understand what we're talking about.
I'm the first person in my family to go to college.
Okay.
And so I didn't have any idea what that meant or what the costs would really mean. So I remember I signed the loan documents and, you're 18, you're like, what does this even mean? And I had this job at J.C. Penney,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot like my protagonist in the book. She also works retail. And I really tried to have my J.C. Penney earnings kind of match what I had to pay for school, and that didn't quite work. But I also had no idea what people did after college. I was first generation. I didn't want to do what my parents did. My dad actually retired from General Motors.
Mm-hmm.
He worked on the assembly line. And so my parents were like, we're sending you to college to do something else. And so I graduated from college and I didn't know what to do. So I took the LSAT and I became a lawyer after I
Oh,
went to
wow.
law school, which was so much more in loan money. And I often joke that I'm like, I bought my house, only my house is loans. Um,
I understand. I overstand, as they say. Yeah.
But I also started talking to my law school friends about it. Money was not necessarily something you were supposed to talk about, but we were all borrowing so much that we wanted to have those conversations. The payback comes from those conversations. It comes from wondering, why we have to take out so much debt, being a little sad that we have this much debt, not
Yeah.
really liking the phone calls from your lender about all the debt, just like all the issues and the shame and the secretiveness around debt in our culture and what exactly, can you do about it in a novel?
Yes, and y'all, when you read the book, we see what the protagonist, the lead character, as well as her. So I have three sisters because there's three main sisters in this book that I wanted to kind of pay homage to them, but just to really think about what that looks like. One thing for me, I could really relate because, as I already said, like I overstand having debt, and it's something that's a really hot topic. It has been ever since really the pandemic, when a lot of things happened with student loans and stuff like that. Well, I should say it's always been a topic, but became more of when there started being certain things to try to help people. And of course, it's big again now that we're going in the opposite direction, that they're not really trying to help people. So the book is definitely timely. I mean, even to today, there are still things happening as it pertains to student loans and how people are able to pay them back. But one of the things I really love about this book is that it turns it where it talks about really how it impacts us in the Black community, and specifically as Black women.
We take out the most debt, and then when we graduate from school, we are paid the least. And so we're forced to carry more debt than anyone else in the United States. I wanted to speak to that. That's my experience. I wanted to talk about how this affected Black women specifically, because a lot of the discussion about student debt is kind of, they don't want to name out particular demographics. They don't want to break it down into who's really suffering from that. And I think that does us a disservice. I think that we should talk about what we go through, how we're not paid as well as other people, and how this debt is more of a burden for us, and to hopefully inspire folks to do something about it.
Right. Definitely to do something about it, because many of you all know every year there's a Black Women's Equal Pay Day, which is basically telling you how much longer it is for us as Black women to make the same as a white man. So what they made at the end of last year, it takes us to the summertime of this year, or sometimes even longer, depending on what you're doing, to even equate to what that person would make. So, and we oftentimes hear about how much we have saved, whether we're homeowners, all these sorts of things. So I think it is an important conversation. And I love that you're having the conversation in this story, which is, it's exciting. There's humor in it. I love your style of writing, because there's a lot of humor in it, even though it's not really funny. But you know what I'm saying? It's not really funny, but because of the way you tell the story, there's humor in it. But it also, for me, it gave me a lot of food for thought in that. So thank you for being ready and willing and able to have these tough discussions. So, just looking at the characters, we have, as I already stated, there are three main characters. The first is Jada. So, tell us a little bit about who Jada is and how she kind of is the center of the story.
Jada loves clothes and fashion above everything else in her life. She went to school, she went to film school, and she realized she wasn't necessarily going to be the person writing the movie or directing the movie. What she wanted was to dress everybody in the movie. She wanted to be a wardrobe stylist. That was her dream. Before that, she made her own clothes in school. She would sew them, in part because that's what she could afford, in part because she just wanted to look more unique and original than other people.
Mhm.
And so she took out her loans to fulfill her costume designer dreams. And she did a really nice job at that for a very long time. She worked in Hollywood. She was outfitting folks in film and TV. And then there was a little wardrobe malfunction in her life. And so she lost her job, and now she's back working at the mall. She's outfitting people, but she's getting paid a lot less. And so
Right.
that's why she can't quite pay her loans back.
And what I love about her character is that even though she's not currently doing what it was she set out to do, she is still, as you said, finding a way to outfit people. She's still like, I love how even in your blurb about the book, it says she can look across the room and tell what size somebody wears, or what their shoe size is, or what's going to fit them, and things like that. And so it just speaks to someone who has a natural gift, but of course, she had been trying to make her way in this Hollywood world. So there's Jada, but then, she's working in the store with two other lovely ladies, one who is Lene, and she is a very different type of character as well.
Lene is she's into punk music. She has a punk band called the Donner Party, and she and her three black girlfriends. They play punk music that Jada does not really understand or appreciate, but she tries to support because they're friends.
Mm-hmm.
Lene knew she wasn't necessarily going to come out of college and want to make all the money in the world. She wanted to come out of college and be happy. She wanted music to work out, and she doesn't mind working at the mall as a way to finance the music. And but all of this isn't quite adding up for her. She can't really pay her loans back either. But she doesn't even really believe in the system that gave them to her. She's our punk, and she's also our she doesn't believe in our system. She's probably the person who's most against the idea that you should have to take out loans at the beginning of the book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. And last but not least, we have Audrey, who's also a very interesting and powerful character as well in the book.
Audrey used to work for the National Security Administration. She was a hacker, and then she was so good at it that the NSA brought her in to do professional government-based hacking. But at work, there was a leak, and they were looking around for somebody to blame, and they went, "Well, there's one black girl here. Why don't we just blame her?" And so she ended up at the mall because she wasn't going to be working in government anymore, and she couldn't find anybody else to pay her for hacking. She does not care about clothes. She's not
Right,
at the boutique that Jada and Lene work at because she's a fashionable person. She cares about outfitting people. She just works the cash register and does something with her days.
right, right. So I wanted you to just give us a backdrop of who these three main ladies are, because for a couple of reasons, just so we can know who this story is about. But also, I like the fact that not only are they very different, but they're very different, and they're very different just as characters, but they're also different from a lot of the women that we may typically see as black female characters in books.
Yeah, Jada is messy. Like she's not above finding something in the fitting room and going, "Oh, can I sell this to pay my rent?"
Right.
She really wants to do the right thing, but she also doesn't want to be on the street. And so her morals are a little flexible,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't think you see in a ton of fiction with black women in it. But we're messy too. I wanted to write
Oh,
a
yeah, we
character
are.
for the messy girls.
Oh, the messy girl stand up. Woo! Right.
Lene is punk, and I don't think you see a lot of that either. There have always been black people in the punk scene. I mean, we invented rock music, and that's just one sliver of it that we've always been involved in. It was important for me to have a punk girl. I like punk music, and to just have her be her full punk self in this book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Audrey being a hacker, we when we hear hacker, you think white male. You don't think someone like her. So that is unique as well.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, but I mean, we can do anything. And she sat down at the computer and she figured it out, and she got to some very, very high places before her fall as a hacker.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that was just really good to see that, because we are not a monolith, and to have these three different women who maybe under normal circumstances wouldn't even know each other, but through circumstances, all because issues going on at work, basically, and they found themselves having to try to make ends meet, and they all wind up working in this same retail establishment together. So, and how they form, a relationship and the things that happen from there. So, I love that. It's kind of like a meet cute, even though it's not a romance.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it's really nice to see that. So, we've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but just the fact when we think about the debt, and in this book, and again, we're not going to give you any type of spoilers, but it even talks about there are debt police, which is also an interesting concept, because it's one thing to have somebody sending you nasty letters, or or calling you on the phone, or whatever the case may be, but it's a whole nother thing when you have something called a debt police that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. We just like inventing police for things. It's one of the silliest habits in this country. For some reason, the budget comes up and everybody goes, "Do we have enough cops?" The debt police kind of came from America's desire to over police people in generally, but also black women in particular, black folks. in particular. And but also just we also punish people for making mistakes in our culture, which I cannot stand. So the debt police are kind of a satire of that. They run around and they talk about their chakras and their crystals and their anti-vaxxers and all that, but they also are just a pretty typical face of law enforcement. They hunt people down, they harass people, they make them feel unsafe. And so the debt police are, I actually based them on Mary Kay ladies in a way. There's
Okay.
something
Okay.
culty.
Well,
There's
explain that for those who haven't read the book yet.
my mother really loved Mary Kay products. She would get all the catalogs and stuff. She wouldn't sell, but she loved them.
Oh, wow.
She was like, oh, you just get all this makeup and you look cute. And I was like 9 or 10. I was like, oh, this sounds like the way. Like it's all solved for you. You get all the makeup and you look cute. But they were also kind of like a cult. Like you could work your way up to the pink Cadillac. They very much believed in this philosophy of sales. The debt police are like that. You can work your way up to the top of the organization by taking people's money or by harassing them or beating them up. And you can work your way up to a turquoise car. Your uniform becomes more and more turquoise as you take money from people.
Wow. Wow. So no shade to the Mary Kay ladies out there or
Yeah.
Avon ladies or whatever the case may be. But yeah, it's just something to think about. And there are, as you said, we come in this world in the United States specifically, there is this big thing about policing. And whether it's the school or the mall, you got your mall cops and all these different places where you have more and more people to try to law and order, so to speak, whatever that may be, and oftentimes it's more not being lawful and more disorderly than anything. So that was something just to think that in this book, which is kind of like, it's futuristic. You don't give a date, but I know it is a little futuristic in the way that it's being told. But to think that that's something that could happen, especially in the times we're living in right now.
Yeah, the Department of Education under Trump has decided to be more of an enforcement body. They will garnish your wages. They can take your driver's license. If you have like a commercial or truck license, they can take that. So basically, they can take away things you would need to make the sort of money that you would use to pay back your student loans. They have gone out of their way to emphasize the fact that they will be doing more enforcement. While they haven't quite invented a debt police, it feels like in a lot of ways we could only be a step or two away from that. I mean, ICE before this administration was not really a police force that went out and harassed people on the street. They were not pulling out in front of Home Depot trying to harass folks who wanted to install your cabinets. They were a force that dealt with people with criminal convictions who had orders of deportation, a very tiny amount of the population than what they're trying to do for now. And their roles have been expanded and to threaten and harass more people. So in that sense, do we have police that could have their duties like expand to include more harassment? Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, as you said earlier on, just the whole concept of debt and who has it and people's attitudes towards it are very different. And I was just really thinking about, the whole concept of education. And we look at other countries, there are places where you can be educated for the purpose of elevating yourself and being able to get better jobs or whatever, or follow certain career paths that they don't charge as much. They may not charge anything because they look at educating people as a way to build a greater society, so to speak. But in this country, it's very different. It's become, in a lot of ways, about how much money can you charge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a profit motive.
Mm-hmm.
The schools raise their prices every year, and they say it's to improve buildings and pay teachers, and I get that. But it has resulted in these tuitions that are sky high. Sometimes it feels like the point is more to profit off of the students than it is to provide an education. When the top private schools are about $90,000 a year now, that really smacks of just we want to collect more money for ourselves, as opposed to we're going to update a building every year or we're going to hire new faculty all the time. I believe in universities and I believe in what they do.
Absolutely.
But I also believe in I think people should have the right to better themselves at an affordable price.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That definitely is true and makes a whole lot of sense because you're $90,000. And the thing of it is that, like in the case with these young ladies, and they have varying amounts of debt. You have to read the book to see who's got what, because like I said, we don't tell everything. But it's like, is the money that you're going to make comparable to the amount that you spent to get the education?
Yeah, I personally, I worried about that a lot, especially when I came out of college and couldn't actually find anybody who really wanted to hire. I would major in economics and political science. And so for most of the jobs that came out, they wanted you to actually take marketing classes and join the business school. And my university was not super good on career fairs. They kind of threw all of us who did, it was called arts and letters. So like everything that wasn't the business school or engineering or the medical school was in one big school, and they'd have one big career fair. And you'd just kind of wander around going, I hope you like my major.
Oh, wow.
But if they don't, then you end up with this debt and you have no plan to pay it. A lot of times, like the younger kids now are having a hard time finding jobs out of school too, and tuition has become sky high. And so I've talked to a fair amount of younger people who are just really struggling the difference between what they make and what they were charged to go to university at. It's a real problem.
Mm-hmm. It is a challenge. It is a challenge. And, again, in the book, all Jada, Audrey, and Lene, they're all facing this for different reasons. And then, of course, there's always, certain catalysts that happen in the book that get them to take the route that they do. But along the way, we really do get to know some things about them and how all of these things are hanging over them. Because I think that's something people might not, unless you're living it, people might not understand that if I'm out here and I have to make a decision, it's kind of like with the elderly. Do I buy my medicine or do I do this other thing? It's the same thing with them. Do I pay my rent? Do I have a little piece of car to get around so I can get to work, or do I pay this loan?
I think more people should talk about money in their books. I love talking about money. It's one of the biggest conflicts we have as Americans. Rent is expensive. Food is expensive. Things cost a lot, and they're going up all the time, these tariffs, etc. And the girls are, so I wanted them, especially because they're working class, to just talk about what working class people face. I paid my own way through college. I won a scholarship, but then I didn't have parents who could financially support me at all. And so I had to deal with all of my everyday expenses myself because they just did not make enough money to support me. I went through years of, so what can I make that is not meat? Like, because meat is expensive. Like, what can I do with tofu this week? Or I used to have a big box of Bisquick, and I would just go, well, I'll just make biscuits and like eggs or something. I was just a connoisseur of the cheap meal. And in the book, they're like that because that's real. That's the working class. You are making choices between rent and food, etc.
Yeah, it definitely is. It is something. And in the case of all of these young ladies, it's the cost of, or the price you have to pay between doing what it is that you have to do versus doing what it is that you really want to do or what you've dreamt of doing. And oftentimes the sacrifices that have to be made. And we see all three of our ladies having to make sacrifices.
The whole book, they're drifting farther and farther away from what they want to do versus what they have to do, which is why they end up being desperate enough to even think about doing a heist. Right. They don't see a future in which, Jada is really able to go back into fashion if she's getting harassed by debt police and she's like afraid to go outside or be in public, or they're beating her up and she's got marks on her face. You can't go for an interview like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're dealing with situations like that, and they're like, well, eventually we have to do something about this if we're hoping to like even get a quarter of what we want in life. We have to get these people off our backs, these police.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no, these debt, y'all, when you read this book, these debt police are ruthless. As you mentioned, beating people up and snatching you, like you minding your own business, and somebody comes up in this turquoise thing, and they look a certain way that are going to cause you to capture their attention, almost like somebody's going to serve you papers. Like, well, I'm gonna get your attention so I can serve you with this thing that you owe this debt. And yeah, the way that they were treating people. And it's like, okay, we came over here this time and, we might rough you up a little bit. That's your warning. Next time we come back, it's going to be worse. And, just in that, I was also thinking about how, like, you see situations in schools where, like, young Black girls or Black girls, women are roughed up or treated poorly. So I could take that from that as well, how they're getting treated differently than others. Because I know that the Black women are the protagonists in the center of this book, but we don't see that. We don't really hear these same kind of stories happening with other people. It's only the certain ones that are getting this type of treatment.
Yeah, part of that was inspired by, I mean, our as Black people, our neighborhoods are just more policed. Like they'll have the cars and they'll just kind of drive by, or the cops will establish like a presence on the corner. Not to, I mean, there is usually nothing happening so far as I can tell, but they like to just kind of be there to make teens afraid to be outside, to make like the community afraid to be outside. I wanted to talk about some of that because I think a lot of people see policing as like, who are not necessarily Black or from Black neighborhoods or haven't experienced this, as just, oh, maybe you call 911 and maybe they show up and maybe they help people. And instead, for a lot of people, unfortunately, they're actually this hulking presence that's in your neighborhood that you can't escape. Whether you're doing anything or not, you're just kind of like looking at how you're moving. You're looking at how you're being outside, and you're like, you're walking differently. You're talking differently. It's not right. And I thought that would be a fun thing to put in the book for folks who have not experienced that, so they could see it.
You can see it. So I know the book hasn't been out that long, but just thinking about that, people being able to see it, what has some of the feedback been that you've gotten maybe from people who are outside of the community who don't understand that?
What's funny is people want to talk about the turquoiseness of the police, but they don't necessarily want to go into just the hovering, the constantly being there in the neighborhoods. I used to live in New York, and that's what I remember about going to all sorts of neighborhoods in New York. You would come out of the subway stop and you would see the cops on the corner, and you would be like, oh, this is one of those neighborhoods where they never leave.
Okay.
So it's been 8 days. We'll see. I hope somebody brings that up. It would be really nice if people understood that sort of policing, but not yet.
Yeah, but it's just interesting because certain audiences are going to see things differently. Because as I was reading the book, and I told you earlier, I was talking to my mom about it, and mentioned some of the themes, and she was like, because she could relate, as a Black woman, who later in life she went back and got a master's degree and things like that. So she understands what all this is to have a loan or whatever, and what it all means and how it impacts you. Even in later in life, it can, if you decide, if you're thinking, I want to do something to continue to further my life and have better opportunities or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, it can impact you at any age. So, but she understood immediately. So, but it also brings up the thing, though, and when you read the book, it is explored a little bit that, yes, we know that getting a college education is beneficial. Number one, we know it's not for everybody, right? Or I should say can be beneficial. Let me just say that a little bit differently. But also, is it always necessary? And may there be other routes to accomplish the same goals?
Especially in Lene's case, she wants to get out and she wants to play punk music. And, she's one of those people where it's just like she wanted to study music and she didn't quite know what type of music she wanted to study. She ended up starting out in classical and then realizing that that's not actually where her heart lay. And she's definitely a person who's just sort of like, did I need to? Is that something I needed to do? Like, there's a lot of pressure to go to college socially in a lot of communities, a lot of neighborhoods. My parents just wanted me to go because they hadn't gone. They were convinced that, I would go and I would have all these opportunities that were available to me as a result of going that they did not have. And, so I wouldn't have to work in the factory putting brakes on cars like my dad did. But you should really know. What I ended up learning way after the fact is you should really know why you're there and what you're going to spend that money on and where you see yourself coming out at the end. These are big thoughts for like an 18-year-old who isn't necessarily planned their life to a certain extent. But yeah, in the book they definitely explore, was this necessary, especially given that we're now being harassed by these debt police
Mhm.
Was this worth it? Did we have to go back to school for everything? I also came up in a generation, I think I note this in the book, where everybody thought for a while the solution to any career crisis was maybe just more school.
Oh
Maybe
God.
you would just figure it out some way to make it sort of kind of affordable, but obviously you would be making more money, so it would work out, right?
Yeah, I see you laughing. Yeah, right. And I mean, and for some people it does, and for some it doesn't. I mean, that's just real because think about, a lot, we are as Black women the most educated. We do go back and get the most degrees. And I mean, there are a lot of thoughts about the reasons why we might do that.
Hmm.
Sometimes it may be because we're trying to get ahead. Sometimes it just might be maybe a space filler for, other things. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why people might continue to go back and and get more education, but really to think about what the payoff is going to be in that. And trust us, neither one of us are anti-education. Not
Hmm.
saying that because I wouldn't have the debt if I was anti-education. Okay.
Hmm.
But it's just the fact that really there came a point in my life where I realized, like, why do I keep doing this?
Yes.
you know
Yeah.
I mean, just being real, because what I'm doing right now, talking to you, which is something I love doing, I didn't go to school for this. So it's like, yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to be a writer because I have not done a degree for that, and I'm not going to. I did my law school time, I did my college time, and I'm good. I 100% believe in the value of education, but I took out an amount for law school and college that I used to call my house of debt, like because it was about what a house might cost in some markets, and I'm good.
Well, but just speaking of writing, you say you didn't go to school for that. How did you find yourself? You said you went to school for poli sci, and something else. I forget what the other.
Economics.
Economics. So how did you personally make that shift from being in that space to now, like, being a television writer? Have a couple books out in the world, and I know more to come. How do you personally make a shift?
I was the little kid who read all the books that I could find at my school library. I actually wrote my first book when I was 10. I
Oh wow.
didn't know how to write a book, but I knew that it needed illustrations, and I knew that even as a 10-year-old, adults had sex. I didn't know what sex was. And so, but I was like, okay, we need a detective, we need like a love interest, and we need something sexual to happen.
Oh
I
wow.
came from a conservative Christian family, but I had read,
You know.
yeah, but I was like, well, but these are adult themes. I need to be more adult. And so I wrote and illustrated this book, and my mom was like,
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. Mom was like, no.
No. But like, what's funny, I mean, she likes that I publish books now. But yeah, back in the day, she was just like, I don't know about a 10-year-old putting together stuff like this. So I guess what I mean to say is, I've been this person the whole time. I've always wanted to write books. And I've
Mm,
always tried. I had a book going when I was in law school that I didn't end up getting published. From time to time, I sit down and write a book, and I'm glad that they started getting published.
Now, I mentioned at the top that, there are aspects of the book that are funny. You had opportunities to, work with Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, other places where, humor is a big part of it. And so have you always been told that you were funny or enjoy being funny, or where did that, and I mean, you're the type of wit that you show in the book is not, just straight telling jokes, obviously, but just there's humor in the descriptions and the ways that your characters relate to one another and all of that. So where did that come from?
I had my kid, and I was like, he was very clearly like an easy baby. I was
Okay.
like, oh, I was a freelance journalist at the time, but I was like, this isn't going to be a high maintenance guy. Like, I'm going to need something else to do when he gets big and he goes to school. And then I've always wanted to learn how to tell jokes. My parents were the kinds of people who listen to stand up in the car. Like,
Okay.
we would be driving someplace and they would put on Robin Williams, or they would put on Bill Cosby, or they would put on Richard Pryor. And I always thought that was fun. And I always thought it would be fun to learn how to tell jokes. So I went to Twitter. And Twitter, back in the old days, the 140 character limit was just a great place to tell your jokes and make sure they were short and tight and they hit.
I love
And
that.
so I would just practice all day. I would just fire 1 to 10 jokes into the box, and I would see every day. And I would just see, did they work? Did I like them, even if other people liked them? And after a few years of that, I developed a sensibility. And then the Daily Show sent me a DM.
Wow. Wow. Just
Yeah.
from being on Twitter?
Just from being on Twitter. This was 2017. People did that back then. You could never get hired on late night this way anymore.
Wow. Y'all, man, that's worth a whole conversation in and of itself. That's pretty powerful, Kashana, just to think. So this is for everybody out here. If you got a skill, a gift, a talent, whether it's singing, writing, telling jokes, whatever it is, just to, put it out there and not to be afraid to do that. And really, yeah, I mean, that's pretty powerful. I did not know that. So I'm glad I asked that.
I've just started telling that story. I was the first Black woman to write on the Daily Show too. I should note. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. And just because you say, "Hey, I think I want to try out some jokes on social media," and never thinking that somebody's going to reach out and say that they saw that. So yeah, that's really an encouragement for anybody who's watching. I know y'all are quiet today, but anybody who's watching, if you got a dream, and I'm thinking me too, like, okay, yeah, keep putting these videos out, keep doing your thing, because you never know. You never know. You never know. So yes, but yeah, the humor is definitely there. Also, you're very descriptive as well. I love the way that you describe things. Whether it's Jada, talking up a lot with the clothing. So is that something that's a passion of yours as well, like clothing and fashion and things like that? Because I mean, Jada is really, really good at that. Or was that something you just kind of had to learn in the development of the character?
Oh, no. I was the 13-year-old girl who was reading Vogue at the library.
Okay.
I used to be able to do the Jada trick. Like, I used to be able to look at people and be like, 28-inch waist, 29-inch inseam, 6.5 shoe.
Wow. That is pretty powerful. I know when I was looking, somebody in the reviews actually said something about that. They were like, wow, I learned a lot. This lady just looking at people and figuring things out. So that's a pretty good skill. And now you already mentioned that, like Lene, that you like punk rock, but she's like an Afro punk type rocker because she's in an all Black girl band. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Afro punk. I like Black rock music. I love my rap and I love my R&B and also that stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in the story, there are parts where you also like tap into like 70s disco and 80s and just a different types of music. So obviously you're a music lover as well.
The book actually came together when I was listening to the Bobby Brown album Don't Be Cruel a lot on repeat. Yes, it was one of my parents' favorite albums. They were big New Jack Swing people, and I was a little kid in the back seat going, I like this. I don't understand it, but I like it. And I looked at the suit that he's got in the cover art. They would put him in these, he was 20 years old, and they would put him in these suits with these big shoulders. Mm-hmm. And after looking at him, I was like, who would design these suits? Who would put like a power suit from the 80s on a 20-year-old? And that's how I got Richard, my character, who's the boss of the store where Audrey, Lene, and Jada all work. He was the fashion designer in the 80s. And so he and Jada bond over being the kinds of fashion people that are now forced to work at the mall.
Wow. See, I never would have thought that. Bobby Brown. And see, I came up in that era, so yeah, I can relate to the fashion of the times. I think a lot of times folks focus in on the 90s a lot. This generation, like the 90s and 90s, and the 90s were really, really good. But the 80s had their stuff going on too, musically, fashion wise, all that. Because especially if you think of like early hip hop, that was the 80s. So a lot of that stuff it's still, it's still meaningful. And a little bit of the late, you talk about the 70s with some of the disco and stuff. I love the disco music as well. So you had a well-rounded knowledge of that music.
My parents were big disco people too. That's where they met and went out. They would go to the disco every night. And there's all these pictures of them in the photo albums we have. They're both wearing bell bottoms, and like they look like they're trying to do their own Black Chicago and Studio 54 thing. They're both from Chicago. They met in the Chicago clubs. And I thought they looked so glamorous in the pictures, and they would still play disco when I was a little kid on like the older R&B stations every once in a while when we went to go visit our relatives in Chicago. And I just really, really hooked onto that stuff. I love that stuff. I put on Diana Ross's album Diana today. I've put it
Yeah.
on for like the last 3 days. And my family's like, what's going on? Like, I just like a disco sound. I thought there's like happiness and sadness in the tone of that era, but the beats are great.
Yeah, the beats are great. Yeah, fun fact about me: when I like some days, I have my little Fitbit, and some days if I don't have enough steps, I will put on like the disco and just dance around the house. But I've hit my 10,000 steps now. It serves its purpose. But I love that. And, we're having I'm asking you these questions, but really these are things that are showing up in the book in different ways as you're telling the story. So I love hearing like the backstory to understand that these are parts of you and a part of your life, even though these characters aren't you per se, but there are parts of you that are showing up, whether it's, situationally or just some of the stuff that's happening in the characters. So I love that you were able to include parts of yourself in the book.
Jada is a music person. Like, she always has a soundtrack no matter where she goes. If she's driving around LA, that's the set of music she plays. If she's walking someplace, that she plays music. It was really fun to think about a character who was that musical. We had a playlist we were mailing out with the book. It's on Spotify.
Okay.
And it has the disco, and it has the like Bobby Brown type stuff. I think New Edition, and I'm trying to remember who else. Yeah, there's like an 80s section, there's a 70s section, there's a punk section. And then Jada really loved Peter Gabriel. He made an entire album about somebody losing it in the early 80s, and she's losing it. And so she likes, because when she thinks about not being able to afford rent or being harassed by the debt police, she likes to lose it and put on this album about somebody absolutely losing their mind.
And these ladies do get to a point. I know some of y'all might be like, what are y'all talking about? But it all comes into the book. See, we have to talk about something without telling you the whole story, though. So there are things that are happening in the background as these ladies are dealing with the debt police and, working or not, and just really getting to a place of having to decide, how are we going to try to rectify what's happening with us? Similarly, because to like Set It Off, many of y'all have seen Set It Off. So that was something that immediately popped into my mind with when I thought about this book or when I heard about it. Because I'm like, yeah, these are these women who are in a situation and they want to get out of this situation. So they're finding their own way to quote unquote set it off.
They take a hard look at their skill set and they go, well, we've got one hacker and we've got one person. Well, Jada, as she puts it, is always someplace she's not supposed to be.
Right.
And Lene is very pretty. And so they go, what can we do with that? And so they put together this plan to finally get off from under the harassment and the fear of the debt police and stage a heist against their student loan company so that they can, pay off their loans by erasing any record that the debts were ever held.
No, I'm like, woo, child. People say, don't try this at home. Be like, please do. Where's the sister out there that knows how to, yeah. But I mean, it's a brilliant idea. And like you said, they have the skill set. And, they come up with the whole plan. You all have got to read the book, to see what the plan entirely consists of. But I just think that it's brilliant because, people will be like, oh, well, it's stealing, whatever it is you want to say about that. But for me, I look at it as, okay, we're in these situations. All three of us are in this situation that doesn't serve us. And we're tired of it. And we're tired of seeing others, because it's not just them. We're tired of seeing others around us that are being impacted by these debt police and by all of these things that keep people from really being able to get ahead by the threat. And to say, hey, I'm going to take things into my own hands and come up with a solution. And Black women are known for doing that, just in general. Maybe not in this way. You know what I'm saying? We see stuff not right in the world, and we're going to come together and figure some stuff out.
Yeah, we have a plan. We have
a plan. So we get to watch these ladies and see what their plan is which is a brilliant plan. But of course, like in anything, and again, no spoilers, everything doesn't necessarily go exactly the way that they planned, but they had a plan.
The way I will put it is they have a plan, but it runs into our surveillance state. Our surveillance state is pretty big. I mean, in LA where I live, the way I think about it is there's probably 2 or 3 cameras on every block watching you. They're
Wow.
mounted from the outside of the building, they're mounted inside the garage you enter, they're mounted on everywhere. Like you can see them. There's like these little ones with like balls that look like they're like the world or something. There are
Mm,
these big ones that look like flashlights kind of mounted to people's houses. Without giving any spoilers, I'm just going to note that the surveillance state is hardcore, that it's hard to do anything like a heist without cameras, tracking, police, etc. That they end up trying to strategize around that. And they do to a certain extent, but they have some failures.
yeah, and they have some things that go wrong, but it speaks to the point that Big Brother is always watching.
Mm.
Big Brother is always watching. I'm sure Big Brother is listening to this conversation.
Oh, you bet.
It's so funny. I'll be talking to a friend and we might be talking about, I don't know, whatever it is. The next thing you know, it's showing up on Instagram feed. It's showing
Mhm.
up, it's showing up in all these different places. So, well, not to tell too much of the story, but people are aware that that is the case. So, how do you try to get around all of the ways that folks might know what it is that you're trying to do? And again, using the skill set that you have.
But to be honest, that was one of the most fun parts of the book to get to put together. To
Really?
really take a hard look at the surveillance state and go, what could they even attempt to do to get around it? Like to think your way through that sort of problem.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Because, yeah, there were a lot of things that had to be considered. And then also them navigating their friendship or relationship in the midst of that. Because, yes, they're all in a similar situation. But, are they all on the same page? Is maybe somebody going to try to go rogue? All of those sorts of things, when you're dealing with humans and, wondering what it is that they're really in it for, or how they may respond if things don't go right.
When I read crime fiction, I think of the great tradition of both everybody bringing different skills to your heist crew, and then everybody maybe being a little worried about the other people in the crew, or thinking that their skill set doesn't match up, or having a reason why they think they might snitch or quit. And it was really fun to put those dynamics together too, to look at 3 very different women who,
Mm-hmm.
yes, even though they're all about the same age and they work at the same store in the mall, have 3 very different skill sets. But also, just you're planning to do something as shady as this. Of course, you're worried somebody's going to squeal or snitch or quit. And
Mm-hmm.
to just work those dynamics. How do you keep a group like that together long enough to attempt a heist against the biggest student lender in the country? It
Mm-hmm.
was great. That was fun too.
Yeah, it's fun. And one thing I didn't bring up, these women are not 20 or 25. These women are almost 40. So there's that element as well, that these are mature women. So of course, when you decided to craft this book, you could have made them any age. What was it that led you to want to make them a little more mature?
I think you need enough time after you graduate from college to realize that maybe those loans are not going to get paid back. But I also thought it would be fun to have women at midlife, because midlife generally could be a time when you don't think your life has lived up to what it should have. And so the difference between who you are, where you want to be, what you want to be doing can be large. In the book, it's heightened, it's satirized, it results in a heist. But at the end of the day, sometimes you hit 40 and you're not quite who you want to be. And so I thought that would be an interesting perspective to write from. 20-year-olds don't necessarily know who they want to be either, but their loans are fresher. They're more potential. They can see the future, and they sometimes feel like it's a little brighter. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, older women are fascinating too. I always thought a heist with older women would be fun. But there's something about middle age and how it's sort of ignored that made that feel like but also a time that's full of conflict in your life. That felt
It
like a
is.
rich thing to conquer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yes, because that obviously everything in the book is a choice, but yes, I didn't want to not mention that because yeah, it's like you can get to be 40 or older. Because again, you have people who decide to go back and do things later in life because maybe they started that first career and it wasn't fulfilling. and then they go and do something, try to do something else, and then realize, if I do this, I may have to start from scratch, so to speak, you know, and then not making as much money, but then I have to, do all of these things. So I really enjoyed this book so much, Kashana, because yes, the story and the heist and the telling of the stories and, all of the kind of the backdrop stuff with the music and, the differences in the women and all of that. But you did a really good job of talking about all of those things. Excuse me, the racism of it all and the some of the debt practices, the sexism, the fact that things that others might do that they can bounce back from a little more easily, that it is more of a challenge, for some of us, as Black and or woman or, a person of color, whatever the case may be. So I like that. It's really talking about a lot of social political issues, but it's done in such a way, excuse me, that it's a fun story to read, in spite of all the stuff that's really going on at the core and the root of it.
I always try to do that. I like jokes. I like humor. I like lighter tone things. I know there are lots of serious authors out there. I always feel like they're just looking at me like all suspiciously. But I like talking about the socioeconomic, the socio-political issues. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to want to read 300 pages of loan documents. So I
Right.
figure, we'll have some jokes, we'll have some lateness, we'll have some humor, and then you'll go, oh, I learned something. What do
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. 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 I definitely did, and that's why even before I read it, I knew it was going to be good. Even before I read it, but once I started reading it, I'm like, oh wow, this is really good, and it's just a lot of food for thought. And it does come to a point that we think about, especially since some of these things, maybe not debt police per se, but just things that are happening that we do need to start to really think about how we deal with those types of issues. What are the things that we can do? How can we fight back? I'm not saying plan a heist, but if you decide to wipe stuff out, call me. I'm just saying. But, what kind of things can we really do or think about, whether it's for ourselves who might already find ourselves in these spaces, or maybe even for those who are coming behind us when they start thinking about, going into a career or stuff like that. So do you have any like really thoughts behind that?
there there's the individualist, like, so what am I going to school for and how do I execute my plan so I don't necessarily rack up all these debts? But there's also the collectivist. Well, after we've racked up all these debts, is there anything we can do to help ourselves, help our fellow indebted people, our friends, our family? There are groups that are working on that. One of them is the Debt Collective. I know that they're involved in a lot of political, local, and national organizing around trying to get debt forgiven for a bigger number of people. Biden, really, when he was president, he was very passionate about trying to get the student loans forgiven. He understood the scope and the breadth of the problem. That, if everybody defaults on their student loans tomorrow, we have this huge economic crisis, actually. But a lot of people are getting less and less able to pay due to how much stuff costs. And he really tried to pass a law about it. And then when he couldn't do that, he came up with executive orders. And when those were struck down by the courts, he did new exec orders. And Trump has basically wiped out everything he tried to do to help people out on the student loan front. So we have ourselves, we have our ability to organize. It's a compelling issue. We have groups like the Debt Collective. When Democrats are in power, we might be able to talk to them if we have something going on the ground. I do think there are ways to attack this. And I do think that it's a big enough problem that enough people have debt that it's worth it as a society and as a culture to do something about this to help folks out.
Mm-hmm. It is so important. And as you were saying that, just to think voting. And I know sometimes people, oh, one little vote, blah, blah, blah. Voting, going to, meetings and all those sorts of things, writing to your Congress people, all of these sorts of things. Because even though we might be in a situation right now where it feels like our voices don't matter, but we keep speaking up, we keep letting people know, we keep telling our stories, whatever the case may be, because it might be one way now, but it doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever. And we need to, not just accept things as they are. And I hadn't heard of the debt collective, so I would definitely look that up, because I love collectives. This is the Brown Girl Collective, but definitely look them up, and look for other similar organizations, and just think of things and ways that we can figure out what we can do to make things better for us, and working more together on those issues that we can work on. Like I said, not to say plan a heist, but plan something, because I don't want y'all to be like Marcy and Kashana said. Like, we did not.
Even though I am not going to endorse crime, I will say that I'm kind of surprised nobody did this. I wrote this book in 2023, and I'm like, somebody, like the hackers are going to get on this. Like they hack airplanes, they hack like countries' power grids. Like, really? Like they're not taking out student
debt? The right one hasn't signed on for the job yet. The right person hasn't done it yet. Maybe they'll read your book and be inspired. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's something. It is something for us, all jokes aside, to just really think about what these things mean, and having the conversations, talking about what that really means, and the decisions that we make, why we're making them, all of those sorts of things. It's just so important. So Kashana, I'm gonna show a picture of the book. Oh, I do have to show that cover up close so y'all can see it. So you see Wearing the Shades. There's the money in there, the payback. So the payback, we know James Brown's song, The Payback. But was the book always going to be titled that, or is it something that just kind of came along as you were working through the process?
I submitted it to editors as student loan payback, and then we sold it. And then my editor came back to me, and he was like, I really love that as a submission title. It tells you what the book's about, but like it's a little crunchy. And I was like, yeah, it is a little crunchy. When we got to The Payback, I was happy because that's my dad's favorite James Brown song.
Okay.
He was one of those people who used to walk around the house singing, I don't know karate, but I know crazy. Yeah. So I felt really emotionally connected to that song. And it's in the front. It's in the epigraph.
Yes, it is. And that is one of my favorite James Brown songs. Yeah, that line right there. I don't know karate, but I know crazy. Yes. Yes, because it says payback, revenge, I'm mad. James Brown, The Payback. Yes, it's there. Yes. And the other, which I had never heard of this particular quote before. If history shows anything, it is that there's no better way to justify relations founded on violence to make such relations seem moral than by reframing them in the language of debt. Above all, because it immediately makes it seem that it's the victim who's doing something wrong. That's good. I had never heard that particular quote. But yeah, and how can I put it? As we see in the book, there are people who feel differently about it. Why there's so much discourse that, like, well, you took out you should, you need to pay your debts, and like, okay, yeah, we understand that, but there has to be a better way. That's all we're saying. There has to be a better way. That's it. So I know that your book, baby, Kashana, has been out a week and a day as of right now, the time of this taping. Are there any places that you're going to be going over the next few weeks or months that people can come out and see you, maybe get a book signed, just to hear you talk a little bit more, again, with no spoilers, but just to talk a little bit more, perhaps in person?
In August, on the 11th, I'm reading with this reading series called the Franklin Park Reading Series. They're in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. On I think the 23rd or the 24th, I'm going to the San Diego Book Festival. I'll be there reading and signing. I got invited to the National Book Festival, the one the Library of Congress throws. That's on September 6th. I will be hanging out being the least fancy person there. And then my last date that I currently have booked is the Brooklyn Book Festival, which I have been going to for 15 years. Oh, wow. I don't live in Brooklyn anymore, but at the time, it was just a great place to find Black books for my son. They would have all the African American vendors, the Caribbean American vendors. People would have their own books that they'd signed up and published. It was better. It was a better source of Black books for kids than the bookstores were at the time. They have since caught up in New York, in the section of Brooklyn I live. They have more Black bookstores, but it was a great place to see us represented in the book community. So I'm going to be there doing a panel and hanging out, and that's always a good time. That one's outside.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds really good. So you're going to be out and about. Of course, folks, if you want to know where Kashana is going to be, I'm sure you're sharing those things on your Instagram page, so people can know where to find you, where you'll be. And really, I definitely suggest folks grab a copy of this book because it's a short read. It's not, it's not a 500-page book. It's half that, but it's just something that you'll get the humor. You'll either fall in love or maybe not with the characters, but you're definitely it's a lot of food for thought. It really is a lot of food for thought along the way. So thank you so much, Kashana, for being here with us. I appreciate you. Thank you for, like we did a quick turnaround to get you here because it was just important when I heard about this book and the timeliness of the story and all of that. So thank you so much. So I'm going to let you go get some water. Don't hang up on me yet. Grab some water. I'm going to tell them who's coming tomorrow night, and I'll see you in just a second.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. I enjoyed talking to Kashana, and those of you who are watching either live or who will catch it in the replay, I really do suggest that you grab a copy of the book. It is also available on audio. We didn't talk about that, but it is an audio as well. So you have the option of either reading it or listening to the audio just to dive into the story. And really, as I said, it's a lot of food for thought in the midst of a story that, is pretty interesting and well written, fun, all of that stuff. So one of the spaces, I know there are a lot of places where you can buy books, but there is the Brown Girl Collective Bookstore, which is affiliated with Bookshop. So if you go there, you're going to find Kashana's book there, as well as all of the other guests that we have talked to in this particular space. So normally I do Monday and I do Wednesday, but next week I will be out taking a week off. So I'm giving you 3 this week. So tomorrow night, join us, totally different direction, but tomorrow night, join us for Alelia Bundles, who will be here to talk about Joy Goddess, which is about her great grandmother, Alelia Walker, and the Harlem Renaissance. In case you don't know, Alelia Walker is the daughter of Madam C.J. Walker. So we're going to be talking to Alelia Bundles, who's named after her great grandmother, tomorrow about this new book. And this is nonfiction. So you're going to get some history and things like that about Alelia Walker as well. Some things about the people that were in her life, her mama, Madam CJ, and all that good stuff. So please join us for that conversation and get a little Black history before I take my break for a week. So thank you for everyone for being here. Please, as I said at the top, share this out, like it, go buy the book, all of those good things. And I just thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.